Welcome, everybody. I'm JT Takagi, and I'm glad you could join us tonight for a talk about the film Land of Azaba. I would like to now introduce the director of the documentary forum at City College, which is the host of tonight's event, filmmaker and professor Andrea Weiss.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to tonight's event. And thank you, JT, for that all the amazing work you've done on behalf of the Documentary Forum, and not just for tonight's program, but throughout the year. I want to thank the Rifkin Center for the Humanities and the Arts and the Provost's Office, Year of Sustainability, for supporting tonight's program. And in the interest of transparency, full disclosure, I'm the co-producer of the film we're about to talk about tonight, The Land of Azaba. I'm also the co-director of the MFA program in film. I wear several hats. I'm also the director of the Documentary Forum. And now I would like to introduce Jane Tillman Irving.
I'm delighted, and in full disclosure, we, the Communications Alumni Association of the City College, Communications Alumni Group of the City College Alumni Association, are the co-sponsors of this event, and we hope this will be the beginning of many collaborations with groups on campus. And now I want to introduce tonight's moderator, Esther Tolkoff, class of 1968.
Well, happy Earth Day, everybody. That's what brings us here. We have with us a bunch of excellent CCNY, that's City College of New York, if you haven't guessed it by now, people who have dedicated their tremendous talents and energy to the causes of climate change and biodiversity. And I would like to introduce our panel to you. Okay, here is Greta Schiller, first of all, who is the director. Greta, are you there? There we go. Greta has won Emmys. She is a member of the Communications Alumni Hall of Fame. Next, I'd like to introduce Ana Carnaval, who is a scientist, a professor at City College, a professor of biology, and an expert in biodiversity, which we'll be talking a lot about. And then we have the Stuart Z. Katz Professor of English, Emily Ravito, who is a wonderful creative writer who is with the Masters of Fine Arts Department of Creative Writing at City College, and has devoted a lot of her writing the past couple of years to biodiversity, climate change, and everything related to that. And we're all here on Earth Day. So
well, it's funny, since it's Earth Day, I remembered that when I was in, I think it was junior high, the first Earth Day that Murray Bookchin organized was at the University of Michigan, and I went to that. So you could say I started this film in childhood. But I had made a short film on Long Island about a community restoration of a freshwater lake called the Marion Lake Story. And that's how I first heard about the concept of earth restoration and observed a very small scale relative to this one. And then I wanted to do something more. I loved the topic. I thought it was just fascinating. And I like the idea of hope and resilience, that despite all the crap human beings have done to the earth, the same hands can do something to heal it, which isn't to say it's okay to destroy it and then repair it. It's like a building is torn down and rebuilt, but it's still the idea that something can be done. So I started doing a lot of research on the web and intensive reading on the subject and the philosophy of what it was. And at first I was interested in this rewilding concept, but then I became more interested in the restoration, which is, you know, a fine distinction in some people's eyes. But one thing about restoration is that the idea is that humans are part of the ecosystem, that humans cannot be just taken out of the ecosystem in the way that, like, we created national parks and whatever. So in April of 2014, I went to Spain and went to the location with a camera woman and a production assistant. And we went for 3 days, and I just filmed sample scenes and just observed. And got it. And my Spanish isn't very well, so I could observe, which actually was in a weird way an asset because I could just observe what was happening. And one of the key scenes in the film, the vulture scene, with Carlos is in the vulture hide, was filmed at that time. So I used something, and then I went back like 4 other times to film. Just wanted to find a place where the people were passionate and believable, and that they wouldn't mind me hanging around with a crew and just being there, and I became like one of the animals on the location. It was hilarious. They all didn't even really notice me after a while, and so, there are a lot of the Society for Ecological Restoration, actually, if you go on there are many restoration projects in the world now, but this one was the one. I can't exactly tell you why, because I don't know, but I loved it. I met Carlos. I loved Carlos. We couldn't really speak together, but our hearts always beat in sync. And so it seemed like the place to make the movie.
Oh, first of all, I want to congratulate Greta on this really beautiful film. It was such a treat to watch it today for Earth Day. You know, we all just saw the opening and it's very alarming, you know, when you have this aerial view of land that's been overgrazed looking like that. It's so stark, and the music that you chose is, you know, it starts to make you really, I think, appropriately concerned. And then the movie shifts and says, you know, but there is another way. And then the movie is largely about this other way, you know, dedicated to the real exploration of what it means to restore, you know, what we've done to the earth. And I did, you know, if your intention, as you said, Greta, was to transport us to this kind of magical realm, and Azaba sounds like it's such a magical word. It really worked on me. Yet I also thought, you know, even though it's a very visual medium, the sound in this film is so beautifully done. You could close your eyes and hear, you know, at least 20 different species, the ones that come out at night, the insects, the way that the microphone gets so close when the horses are grazing, and the other animals are grazing, when the pigs are eating the acorns, and even some of the characters, some of the people in the film talk about the delight of the sounds. So it was like a sensory delight all around. I just love how it begins with that quote from the UN Convention on Biodiversity about what we've done to the earth. What humans have done to the earth is no less than a massacre of the other species. You know, we start with that stark truth. And, you know, the fact is, Anna, the biologist on the panel, can correct me if I'm wrong, but I believe that biodiversity has declined alarmingly in the half century. And, you know, 50 years, more than 25,000 species. We're talking about, you know, a third of those known species that are known in danger of disappearing. And so you have this film. I just think it's a beautiful piece of storytelling about that's positive about the possibilities for restoration. I appreciate the distinction that Greta made about rewilding versus restoration as well. I've written a little bit about rewilding in Staten Island post Hurricane Katrina. And, you know, that's where you kind of let the land revert without human intervention. Here you have humans participating in the ecosystem. And I thought the movie was also a very loving portrayal of labor, like what hands can do when they come together to work for harmony among species. And I'll just finish by saying I really appreciated how there was as much attention paid to the animals in this. There's as much time that the camera lingered on animals as it did on, you know, human faces speaking about what they were doing, maybe even more. And so just a really quiet way we would spend time with, you know, owls landing on a perch on a fence.
They're an animal that only exists in this part of Spain. They're called genet, and of course they're threatened. They do a lot of They have to monitor them. Yeah, and so they have a little hide, like a bird hide. And, you know, you can watch them. They only come out, they're night animals.
Yeah,
I was so sick when I filmed that. I couldn't believe I was like, I had a cold. I was literally shivering, it was freezing cold. And I was like, I have got to get these animals. But I think it worked out well.
I'm glad you did. And I mean, it was delightful to see them doing their thing, but also the sound of them like licking the bark to get I imagine they were eating insects. But I loved the amount of love there was kind of transmitted through your appreciation for the labor these humans were doing in their respect for the animal world that came through. It was really a treat to watch on Earth Day. And then the quote I think I really will take away and almost want to use as an epigraph for a book or an article is whatever you love, you want to protect. And that's all, yes, that's true for all of us.
I fell in love with him.
Yeah, of course.
I fell in love with this man.
You know, it's so interesting because the way that I work with biodiversity is I work in very well, to the extent that they exist, less managed ecosystems. So when I do my research, we're camping in the forest, away from lots of activity or management. And when I saw your movie, it really became very clear to me that this is probably a much more efficient way to bring biodiversity to the general public, because this is so much closer to people's realities, right? It's about living, it's about coexisting. It's how you respect nature and keep development going and keep feeding people. And it was really important to me because I have to tell you, Greta, scientists are horrible at communicating their science, right? So with this movie, really, I think what got me very excited was that it was this sense of relief that, oh, really, this is Greta, she totally gets it. And she's doing such a wonderful job getting this message across, right? It's, as Emily was saying, it's poetic, but it's also filled with information, right? It has this nice mix of the science and the humanity of it. So to me, that was a winning line there that oftentimes the pure scientists miss, right? It was humanizing this encounter. That's what you were doing. That is so beautiful, so effective, and so what we need, right? It's what the world really need, is this learning to deal with these two sides.
I would do an probably very unscientific. I would just say it's a sum of all life on Earth. And all life interacts all the time, whether you know it or not. And one example that I like to give that is really simple is take the monarch butterfly. Every animal has a food source and a nesting and a habitat habit. We live in heated apartments with hot water. Most of the world doesn't, but that's our habitat. And the monarch butterfly has one habitat, and that is something called milkweed. But we have destroyed the habitat of milkweed, and we are massacring the butterflies because of it. So my point being that everything has a place and everything matters. And that's, to me, biodiversity.
It's interesting because Greta said, I'm going to use a definition that is not scientific. And what she said is exactly what we tell our students. Biodiversity is the diversity of life on Earth, which was pretty much, these were her words, right? But what it's interesting is that we also want our students to have a very broad understanding of the multiple dimensions that are embedded in this life that we call life, right? So lots of people just think of biodiversity as short for biological diversity, and they think of species, the different kinds of animals, the different types of plants, right? Those are the species. We are species, the human species, for instance, and there are many other species. Actually, we think that there are 1 trillion species out there that we share our planet with. And look at our impact on all of them. We have not described all of them. We're far from knowing all of them and where they are, but we think they exist. But we are really interested in making our students understand that this diversity is not only of species, it's also, for instance, of the genes that each species carries. So biodiversity also includes genetic diversity, right? The diversity of the backbone of the elements that make us alive and make us adapt, right? It also is the diversity of ecosystems. So, I got from a species and I went micro into the gene, but you can also get the species and go macro into the ecosystem. Ecosystem diversity is also biodiversity. So it's this very complex, system of elements, and they're ever lasting, bigger and bigger, that allow the planet to function, right? Together.
I think what Greta just shared about interconnection is a really important part of the word biodiversity, the sum of all life. But also, and the movie gets at this too. One of the characters says, sometimes we're asked, when there's so much human suffering, why are we, so focused on wildlife conservation? And his answer is really good. I won't spoil it, but he talks about how, interconnected we are with each other. Humans are part of this ecosystem, and the biodiversity, like, it's good for all of us that we're thriving. Something that Greta also mentioned, I wonder if she could touch on this too. She mentioned it in the dress rehearsal for tonight, was that even before the term biodiversity came into parlance, we discovered that became sort of part of the common parlance in the 1980s. This is an understanding and a philosophy that has existed, especially in Native cultures, forever, right? It's not a new term, even though we haven't really been using that term for all that long.
I mean, one of the things I tried to find the balance of in the film, because one thing that really, there is kind of a genre of natural history, which is usually a great man goes out and has a brilliant idea and fights David, it's a David and Goliath story, and creates his, this saves the elephant or saves the tiger or whatever. But what I wanted to do was to show that that's not what it's about. It's about, as I think Emily said, it's about a collective will to want to live in harmony with the rest of the bloody world. One of the things that is very important for Carlos is that these are large, well, what do you call ranch in Spanish? Ana, what's a ranch? Fincas. So that they're very large fincas, and most of them have been owned by the same families for, eons, right? But a lot of the people who own the land didn't want to be farmers anymore, so they went to the city and they just left the land. But other ones stayed with the especially if you're a jamon producer, that's a huge, big business.
Yes.
Very expensive it is. It's more expensive than cocaine per ounce. And not that I know anything about that. But anyway, so what he's trying to do is he has all these programs, like when they go out, you see it when we go around with, oh my God, I forget his name, but when we go around to the ponds, following the ponds, and they're monitoring the ponds. And those are all on other people's land, other ranches, other fincas. And what they're doing is modeling. You could say my whole film is modeling. And what they're doing is modeling. And then what happens is in the farm and see, oh, this little area the cows can still drink, but they don't shit in the pond and kill all the life. Like it's a continual process. And as he says in the film, he's like, thousands and thousands of acres have been joined by his bringing people into the fold through seeing that the best practices work for their needs. I mean, like Patricia has a degree in forestry. Juan is a local guy who just has incredible amount of knowledge. He's the one who argues with the other farmer who's part of the project. They just, you know, it's an ongoing, it's an always evolving understanding of what's best practices. And then the other people are like, they're hired. I mean, it's jobs. It's the EU. There's a program in the European Union called the LIFE program, and people apply for money, and so they got some, you know, they get the salaries to pay the actual workers. Oh, and there's a lodge. You can go after COVID. You can go and stay at the lodge, and it's just, you know, a wonderful experience. And then, you know, they sometimes slaughter animals so you can eat the incredible wild boar and horses and cows when they have, because there's only a limit. They've been so successful with reproduction that sometimes they have to harvest them because there's a, you know, they have to keep the balance of how many animals are on the space.
Not all of as beautiful as what we see is, not everything in nature is beautiful. You mentioned the vultures before.
You want to say something about that, Anna?
Yeah.
I just want to defend the vultures. They're beautiful and they're super relevant, right? So they are part of the cycle of recycling matter and energy. And so they may be ugly looking for you, but they're very relevant. So in that sense, in the film, I thought it was pretty brilliant that they were including them as, you know, protagonists as well. They are part of this cycle of life here.
Doing things the natural way, in other words.
Well, of course, yeah. I mean, there are cultures that actually have them central to aesthetics and beliefs, and no, they are absolutely part of it. I mean, right?
In Nepal, they leave people out on raised platforms for the vultures.
Yeah, absolutely.
So, you know, it's everything is relative to your own culture.
Exactly.
I just wanted to add, I mean, on the topic of vultures, there's this beautiful mural. I just wrote a long piece about these Audubon mural projects around City College. There's all these murals that are coming up, and they represent birds that are endangered due to climate change. And there's one local artist named Marta Alicia Matarrita who chose the vulture to represent, and she painted it on a storefront gate that rolls down over, you know, like security gate. But she did two vultures, and she wrote, misunderstood bird. So
Yeah.
Well, I didn't mean to sound like an anti-vulture bigot. I just
No. We totally got it. There are several, right? I mean, we have projects managing biodiversity. National parks does a lot of it. One of the examples that really come to mind to me and that we have our students working on is fire maintenance, right? So fire suppression has been an issue for a long time, and fire has this really aggressive, issue that people are afraid of fires, right? So people put away fires very easily because of how close we are to nature in some of these areas, right? And but fires are essential to several ecosystems. They keep species in check, right? They keep the balance, the interactions balanced. Fires prevent some species from spreading out and having lots of biomass, lots of wood. So for the longest time, when people were avoiding fires, every once in a while there was going to be a big fire, and that would be a big thing and a big problem for the system and for the people around the system. So there are lots of programs that manage fires, and they light fires on purpose, and they have them controlled. So it's pretty much, similar. There's a practice in the US that is very similar in essence to what Greta is talking about, of managing ecosystems. Humans trying to see, how can I facilitate these interactions in a way that they can go on their own, but that I'm allowing biodiversity to restore itself or to maintain itself the way it would naturally be doing. So fire management is one big example.
Yeah, probably at the base of it is parenthood, actually, caring about stewardship because I, want to take care and participate as an activist or being as educated and aware as I am about these issues for the sake of my children. And that's honestly, that's at the root of it. So the piece that you're referring to, the doorway for me was, grappling with thinking about hurricanes, and in particular Hurricane Sandy and its effect upon New York City, and the ways that we are at risk as a coastal city, how that might affect my children, but not only that, how climate change is affecting us already.
Climate change comes about in multiple ways. I mean, we have biodiversity because life evolved on Earth, and life evolved a lot in response to climate change. So climate change is not something that it's new. It's not something that it's only generated by humans. There's been changes in climate, affecting life since the beginning of life, 3.5 billion years ago, right?
Ice Age.
But life has been biodiversity has been responding to these changes, right? Some species go extinct, some species shift where they are, other species adapt, new species emerge, they arise, they're generated. But humans have been pushing the speed of this change in the climate, right? So the problem is not new, the issue is not new. The problem is the velocity of climate change. And we are speeding up this climate change now. And that is something that the biodiversity is not used to. It didn't evolve for billions of years at this pace of climate change, right? So suddenly this change is much higher than it was before in a very limited time frame.
And
it's not only climate, it's not just climate, because we are changing climate, but we're also changing the land, which is really something that Greta is focusing. So I want to bring those because they go really together.
And weather,
it's the climate and the land use. Go ahead, Greta.
Yeah, and weather patterns change.
Weather is reflecting climate, of course.
For example, I mean, the fact that they have the most ancient species of animals on the reserve is because they want to preserve these species because they can withstand many more dramatic changes in diet and climate than the ones that we genetically breed and can only be fed a certain thing, like to create the most milk or the most beef or whatever. And it snowed at the reserve. Carlos sent me pictures the first time in his life. He's like 60. The first time it ever snowed in that part of Spain, and he sent me pictures, and I'm like, oh my God, did the animals survive? He said, yes, they survived. Yeah, they survived. So, well, did you see a skeleton and the vulture hide a little later? They were allowed to die. They had a lot of the horses reproduce really well. There are many horses, but they die. They let them die.
We do know from a scientific standpoint that exposure to sunlight can really impact people's moods and people's levels of activity. But this relationship between emotion and biodiversity or environment also goes the other way around. And there's a fascinating book, and Harry Green, who's a biodiversity scientist, wrote this chapter. And Harry Green is one of the guys who proposed the Pleistocene rewilding idea, the rewilding idea that Greta was talking about, which is really an idea of we need to bring back all of these big carnivores, these big animals, or the big trees, the big organisms that once lived, in our lands, so that they can make their ecological functions again, and we can have a more natural, quote unquote, or regulated. And what I thought was really interesting that Harry made this comment that human societies have been buffering themselves from environmental shifts and from biodiversity loss because of technology, right? Technology protects us makes us sort of buffered from the environment. We have air conditioning, we have heaters, right? So we don't suffer from all the changes that we're causing. And he proposed that the only way that humans can regain respect for biodiversity is when they become fearful of biodiversity again. Is fear, the emotion of fear, that would make us respect diversity. So he was one of these big people saying, we need to bring big cats back, because if you're afraid that a big cat will eat your kid, then you would have more respect for their own environment. And so I saw this comment by Joe, and I just thought I want to mention that because it's a lot about emotions.
I think though that example kind of backwards. I once read an article about, the tech people in California who buy land in the mountains, and then they clear and they want like green yards so their kids can play soccer, their own soccer field and all this shit. And they were anti the mountain. They were they were like, we're going to shoot to kill mountain lions. So I'm not sure if fear kind of maybe, I'm not sure that theory works.
No, I'm not saying that it's right or no. I'm just sharing that this is one person proposing that emotions can really mediate this relationship.
John Muir, when he, was a very important environmentalist and a man of his times, racist, and especially against Native peoples. And he would say, we have all this untamed land, but actually the Native people are like, this isn't untamed. We have crops, we have animals, we're living here. It's just like, it's all about, again, what perspective you're coming from. I recently read an article calling for giving the federal land management back to the bloody tribes. I'm like, yes, that is I can't imagine it happening, but it's such a good idea. It's such an urgent idea. There are in Rhode Island, in New York State, on the reservation lands, there are many restoration, living in harmony with the land efforts to bring back that. And when you go to Society for Ecological Restoration events, there are always in the indigenous tribes, and their management is always brought in and respected. And in some places, like in Washington state, the tribes are actually part of the state mechanism to bring their knowledge about management of land. There's a wonderful book, a woman called Robin Kimmer, and it's called Braiding Sweetgrass. And it's all about her as a Native American woman going into science, being ridiculed for bringing in her American Indian ideas. She repressed it all. She went straight science, and then she brought the Indian knowledge back in. Beautiful book.
Anna herself said scientists aren't the best at communicating what they're doing. That's probably not true for all scientists, but I think whether or not that's even true, I just feel like the state of crisis that we're in terms of what we need to be doing collectively to restore the earth is so urgent that we need all kinds of storytelling, and people respond to different kind of messaging. I just think as many of us as possible at this stage in the game need to be telling the story in whatever way, moves our own heart to connect with other hearts, because it's so urgent that we work on restoration together.
Yeah.
Well, I think this has been great. I think this was a terrific way to spend Earth Day. And
Thank
I
you.
hope that those who have joined us feel that way as well. I'd like to switch back to Jane Tillman Irving. Are you happy?
Esther, this was a fabulous discussion, and I want to thank everybody who participated, and the film is wonderful. I so enjoyed it, from including the dead horses and the strange little raccoon-like animals. What are they called again?
Jeanette, Jenet.
I see, Jeanette. There is something in it for everyone and a very strong message. Greta, you did a really great job.
Thank you.
Again,
Thank you.
The Land of Azaba.
Okay, good night.
Thank
Happy
you.
Earth Day.